So my name is Elliot Harper, and I'm an organizer of the Marketing Cloud Developers Group in Melbourne, Australia. Now, this group has been running for 5 years, and while I've had many interesting topics, or we've had many interesting topics presented over the years, I've never looked forward to a presentation so much than the one that we have today. Interactive email is an exciting new feature for Salesforce Marketing Cloud, and I really believe that this is a game changer for email marketing. And we're privileged to have Matt Schmitter from Salesforce present on this topic. Now, Matt joined Salesforce from Rebel, who had created the core technology behind interactive email. And we have over 210 registrations for this session, which is our largest event registration in the history of our group. And it shows that many others are also excited about this much anticipated new feature. So this session is recorded, and a link to view the video will be distributed after today's presentation. But first, a quick housekeeping note. Please ensure that your microphone is muted. There will be an opportunity for you to ask Matt questions at the end of his presentation, which you can do so from the chat panel. So without further ado, thanks again for attending, and I'll hand over to Matt.
Thanks so much, Elliot. And thanks for the great intro. I think you're spot on. We're obviously incredibly excited about bringing interactive email to everyone within the Marketing Cloud universe, and then seeing this grow hopefully exponentially across email in general. So as Elliot mentioned, I joined Salesforce about 18 months ago as part of the Rebel acquisition, and since that time we've been really focused on integrating interactive email into the Marketing Cloud. I'll do a quick reminder here, as I'm sure you've all seen this before, the forward-looking statement. Since what we're going to talk about today is not yet generally available, please make any decisions based on the products that are, but we are really close to GA. So what we'll go through today is interactive email. What is it? And then a quick overview, some implementation best practices, and a demo. So to lay the groundwork for this, there's a lot of terms that have been floating around, especially in the last couple of years. So interactive email, when we talk about it, is also referred to as kinetic email. You might hear like web functionality within email, actionable email, or even AMP for email. And that last one, that AMP for email, that can be a whole other webinar on its own. So we won't dive into that. And we also won't dive into these other things that you see on the right of your screen, which is, dynamic email or dynamic content, personalized email or live content. That's not interactive email. So interactive email is actually, interacting with elements of the email without leaving the inbox. So, making changes to the actual user interface of the message in the email based on activity. So like a click or a mouse over, something like that. So our goal with interactive email is to fundamentally change how people interact with email. We really wanted to turn the inbox into a surface for your application, whether that be, a website, an interaction, an in-store kind of experience. And really the main things that we want to do and allow you to do as Marketing Cloud customers and developers is to collect more customer data. So by bringing this up in the funnel right into the inbox, we see, great increases in the amount of data that you can capture. And then you can use that data to drive personalization. I'm sure you are all familiar with the power of, how to personalize in the Marketing Cloud through, a variety of different ways, most importantly, based on data and data extensions. And then we also want to boost engagement. So when you think about email, it's been static for a very long time. We do some fancy tricks sometimes to make people think that you can play a video, but it's actually, a triangle over an image. When you click it, it takes you to another site. And so that's about as complicated as it got over the last few years up till this point. But really we want to, get people to the point where they're looking forward to an experience in the inbox that is much like a website. So that they're not dreading clicking that button, thinking that it might, take them to a site that they don't want to go to. They can actually interact in the inbox. And then results. So, as you increase these interactions in the funnel, you bring them up, you can expect to, increase the number of your views or your data that you're driving for your customer profiles or just, engagement in general. And so what we'll look at today, the fundamental interactive email functionality that we're launching with this next release is really based around forms. And to help everyone get started, we've define these 4 interactive use cases. And so if we think about this in the life cycle of a customer in like a retail environment, for instance, you could think about this progressive profiling. So in this example, we're seeing, someone has signed up for an email, for the email program, but we haven't collected any of the other data yet to go with it. We only have the email address. So sending this as a part of the welcome series, we can collect their first name, last name, some of their interests, what are they interested in? And this is all, right with the inbox. This is the native Apple Mail application that we're seeing in these videos, including the buttons, the drop downs. And then when they click update my profile, we're going back to a cloud page in Marketing Cloud, writing that data to a data extension, and it's available for us to use in the future. So now that we've collected some more data about them up front, they've come back, they've made a purchase, and we can follow up post-purchase. So in this case, they bought this great backpack, but we want to know, how did they like it? What did they think about it? And for any of you with an e-commerce presence, reviews are very important to driving additional sales, product engagement. And so being able to rate this right within the inbox makes a big impact. We saw in some cases double the amount of reviews collected as a standalone company when implementing this within email. And so it's really impactful, because especially in this scenario, this is very familiar to people. They see a star rating, they know what to do with it. A star rating and a text and input box is quite universal. Oops. Outside of the video that I want to play. So then the lead form. So now we think about some of the cross-cloud interactions that we can enable with this kind of functionality in Marketing Cloud. So in this case, this person we've identified is actually a high-value customer, and we're going to give them a personal shopping day. And so what we're doing in this case is we're asking them up front, hey, you've got this appointment coming up. How can we prepare for it for your in-store visit? Where are you going? What are you doing? What are you going to be using this equipment that you're looking to buy for on your upcoming trip? So really just informing that associate up front. And how we want to do that then is, like I mentioned, this will flow back into a data extension, and then we can use Journey Builder to push this into Sales Cloud, for instance, to update a record or create a record depending on how they exist within the Salesforce objects at that point. Similarly on the service form side, so after their personal shopping experience, they bought some stuff, but we know from the information we collected last time that their trip was coming up. So right before their trip, we can send them out this other and just collect open-ended, hey, is there anything we can do before you go out? Any last minute questions that you have, just throw them in this box. And what we'll do in this case is we'll push this to Service Cloud to open a case so that one of our agents can follow up and answer any of those last minute questions, and really just wrap up this whole experience with a lot of data and a lot of just great user experience for our customer, so that they feel appreciated. They know that we know, and are using what they're sharing with us, which is really important in personalization. It's not just about collecting data, it's being able to use that data as well. And so, interactive email is probably new for many of us, maybe not, but just some best practices to be cognizant of as you start to think about interactivity. And this could be with the email form block that we're going to talk about today, or any other kind of enhancements that you're thinking about that could bring interactivity. So one of the main questions is, what am I asking my customer to do? Can it be done in email, for one? So in the case of like a review form, we know that can be done in email. That one makes a lot of sense to bring over. Should it be done in email? So maybe you have a complex survey that's 40 questions and takes 25 minutes to complete. That's probably not the best use case for interactive email. Maybe those first 3 to 5 questions will be great to pull up into the email to get someone started, but then you should bring into the site where you'll have a lot more flexibility in terms of how you can engage with that person if they drop off, if they abandon, saving their progress, all of those kind of things. So the second question we'd ask is, does it enhance my customer's experience? Does this make it better? If we're adding interactivity to an email just for the sake of adding interactivity to the email, we're not doing this correctly. So really, we want to be, bringing some value. We want to make it easier for them to connect with us, easier for them to give feedback, whatever the case may be. And then lastly, that leads into, will it improve my results? So it's really important as you go through these initial, experiments with interactive email to test, understand if, interactivity does reduce the friction that you expect. So in the case of, a review form, for instance, if you have a standalone review solicitation email right now, do a split test, keep one static, add an interactivity in the other, and then compare the number of reviews collected to find out if you did have an impact. And as we design the interactive experience, these are kind of the 4 fundamentals. Because this is new, and many people won't expect to be able to interact with it. So I mentioned the video example, but there's other examples I've received in marketing where, it looks like a search bar, for instance, but it's actually an image that takes you to the site. So people are a little, they might be hesitant to click on these potentially interactive experiences because they think we're just going to drive them to the site. So it's really important to keep it clear and simple, make this look like familiar experiences. So on this little screenshot on the right, we know the stars, we know the text boxes, and to be repetitive. We found, as a standalone company, that for our customers who use this over time, the more of these emails that they sent, the higher their engagement rates become, because their customers got used to interacting with it in their inboxes. It wasn't so novel up front. Over time, it was just part of the campaign, how they expected to interact with that brand. And then this is probably the most important one. Don't be afraid to call out the interactive elements. So, in the labels, in the description that we'll look at, we kind of refer to this as helper text sometimes. Tell people, hey, you can do this right here. It's okay to type. Please try it out. You can get fun with this, in brand, just depending on how you can message this. But it's really important to call this out, because if you hide a form with no instruction whatsoever in the bottom of your email, no one's going to interact with it. And so it's really important to call out these design aspects as you're moving through it. Another important part is the fallback experience. So unfortunately, every one of our email clients out there does not support interactive email. And there's a variety of reasons, but it really boils down to some CSS and HTML support that we need to be able to provide these interactive experiences. So there are email clients like Outlook that are not going to show this. And in that case, you have to think about the fallback experience. What do you want that customer to experience when they open the email? First option is no contact. So if you're no content, if you're opening or sending this email to someone and the form is actually supplemental content, maybe you're trying to get some feedback, you're going to keep this in kind of an evergreen state, just like, hey, let us know how you're feeling. In those cases where it's not the main focus of the email, you can just select no content. That section will collapse. For an Outlook or another unsupported client, you would have, just those kind of fold up, and no one would even know. The other option is for like this review email that we're looking at, is to create that static experience. So many times you're going to have that already, and you can just use your existing static content as the fallback. So in this case, you probably might have an email that's just the product image and a link, write a review that goes out to an existing page where the review is collected. That's a perfect fallback experience. And then in both cases, you're optimizing for the email client. And while we're talking about email clients, some of the big ones that you're going to have support on: Apple across iOS and desktop, Gmail across desktop and web applications, desktop and mobile applications, Yahoo, AOL, Samsung supports, there's some Android support sprinkled in through there as well. And then there's also, we're looking into, more regional email clients as well to provide what you can expect on those. But the big ones definitely are the Apple and Gmail that cover a lot of the opens that you'll probably be seeing. I've kind of touched on this before, but when we're thinking about interactive email, because you're not just necessarily always driving to a landing page or collecting that click data, you really have to rethink how you're measuring campaign success. So opens and clicks are great, but in this case, it might not cover it, because an interactive campaign might reduce the number of clicks, because you may be getting that person to do what you wanted to in the email, and there's no reason for them to go to a site. So it's important to define the results that you're looking for and really think about what you're asking the customers to do. So think about, the clicks to that submit button. What do those drive? Is it, product reviews, preferences collected? Is it the number of data points? Is that kind of your metric for success? So that's an important kind of distinction when you start thinking about interactive email. And then once you have that data, think about, how you can use that to continue to derive value. So, it's not just, hey, they click submit, great, look, I got all these data points, I'm never going to do anything with them. It's what can we do to really use that data to move, to move the needle on your program, for instance. So this is just, a few things that we think about. Obviously, you guys are, a community of developers and customers, and you have probably many ideas on how you could use additional data points or supplemental data that you could collect through this path. So, kicking off customer journeys, personalizing email. And I put email in parentheses because you can really use this data to personalize any kinds of campaigns, whether it be SMS, websites, just, kind of once you have this data, you can use it as you would use any of your other data points. Updates to other clouds. So I thought, I've kind of mentioned, Sales and Service Cloud initially, but you could think about, really, are there questions that other parts of your business need answered, where you could collect this in email and push back to the platform that they're using? So even if you're not necessarily in Sales Cloud, but your company uses it, can you help them to fill out profiles on leads that are incomplete, or provide additional information on products to help inform web decisions in terms of what they're sharing, and then obviously initiate processes in other channels. So with the flexibility of interactive email, we're pushing everything to a data extension so that it's there and you can just kind of use it as you see fit. All right, so now the exciting part. Let's talk about the product. So the email form block has 3 requirements. And after we get through this slide and one more, we'll actually jump into Marketing Cloud, and I'll walk through a setup so that we can all see kind of what it looks like, and we can go from there. But really, the first part is Content Builder. So this is a block, so you will need to use an email template where you can drag and drop the email form block. There's a variety of reasons behind that, but basically because interactive emails are complex, we need to be able to control kind of a whole email package for it to render both successfully and consistently across email clients. The second piece is the cloud page. And so I touched on this a couple of times, but there's a new page type that I'll show you. It's called interactive email page. And what this really allows us to do is provide an endpoint, a landing page for that email, which can validate and capture the data. And then you'll have a few options on where you can go from there. If you want to keep them on the cloud page, show them some content, you have that option. If you want to send them to another page directly after the validation submission, that's fine too, you can do that. This is probably very apparent to all of you on the call, but one of the things that we've seen is, with these new interactive email page types, some people might be new to cloud pages. Don't forget to publish your page, or else you won't be able to see it. Your customers won't be able to see it. As you're testing, you'll wonder what's broken. So I'll just throw that in there. And then the third thing is a data extension. So we've allowed, through the creation process, you to create a data extension within the block, or if you'd like to manage these on your own, you can also build your data extension out first, select it within the email form block, and then everything will be tied back to that one. So we'll look at that a little bit in the product as well. So for today, in case you were tired of Northern Trail Outfitters, we're going to switch over to Cumulus today. And so we're going to build an existing welcome campaign. We're going to enhance that. And so this is what it looks like today. You could think about this in like a financial services kind of spectrum, or really any kind of business where you're welcoming someone, trying to collect that profile information, but you're driving them to a landing page. And so what we want to do is we want to bring those elements into the email so that someone can interact with them right there, hopefully collect more of these data points, get more submissions, which can drive better engagement with these customers. And so this is a look at what we will be building today. So let me do a quick switch of the content that I'm presenting. All right. So I'm not going to go through logging into Marketing Cloud. I'm assuming everyone knows where Cloud Pages is. Everyone knows where Content Builder is. So we'll jump in here, and what we'll look at is, I mentioned the 3 things: the block, the Cloud Page, and the data extension. Where I like to start is actually on the Cloud Page. And the reason for that is it's one of the first things that you configure in the block. There's definitely no requirement to start with it, but sometimes this makes it a little bit easier just to kind of visualize what's going on. So if I look at under the create, and in my Cumulus collection, there's a new interactive email page type. And when I click on that, I'll give this a name quickly. All right, and we'll save this. And then on this page, we'll have the option to define our content within the email form block. So What you can see is there's 3 rows essentially, an empty block above and an empty block below the email form block. And so this allows you to drop in additional elements. If you want people to land and stay on this page, you can personalize this with, your header and footer, as well as, possibly promotional content or additional information, kind of anything that you would like to show them. When I click into the email form block, what we'll see is, let me just collapse this top part. The main focus is the confirmation message. And as we go through this, I'm going to touch on a few things. I'm going to skip over some things in the block in the interest of time, but know that our help documentation is actually now live. So if you search for the email form block, you'll be able to find it and kind of go through all of these. But this is kind of what I was mentioning. So in the confirmation message, this is what will display to the user after they click submit. And you have a couple of options. One, no content. So this section can just collapse. You don't have to show them anything. The third one I'll skip to is a redirect to our URL. So if you have an existing landing page that you'd like to drive them to, it's definitely possible for them to just flow through this cloud page and be redirected to there. What I'm going to choose today, though, is a block from Content Builder. And so I'll choose the confirmation block. Just find my form. Thank you. Great. And you can see we're previewing that content. So this is what this subscriber will see once they click submit and everything's successful. So now I'll schedule, and as I mentioned, publish this. Great. So that'll be available for us. So I'm going to jump right into an email here because I'm going to, again, assume that you guys are familiar with templates, how to set stuff up. I've already built my, kind of outline of my new welcome email. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my interactive content block in the email form section here. I'm going to drop this in. And then what we'll see is we have these starting points that I mentioned going into the call. So review, progressive profile, the case and the lead form. And these are really just, again, a place where to give you an idea of what you could do. These are not set in stone by any means. You can edit and delete these questions and fields. It's more of just understanding, hey, I'm gonna have a few of these fields. This is an easier place for me to start, so I can save a few clicks. There's a 5th one, which I didn't talk about before, which is actually the empty starting point. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and choose that today. And this just allows you to start completely from scratch with nothing defined. So again, those 3 pieces were the blocks. So we've got that where we can check the box, the cloud pages destination, and then response capture, which is our data extension. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search my collections. I'm going to jump into Cumulus. And this is where I'm going to look for, this training cloud page that I just built today. Great. That one is attached to the page. And then the second part is the response capture. So I will have the option to use an existing data extension, which takes me into this chooser. So if I predefined one of these, I can grab that. But for this, I'm just going to go ahead and create a data extension automatically. And so I'm going to give this a name. I'll create this. And so that has been created. And what this does is this creates an interactive content folder within your data extensions folder so that it makes these really easy to find. Then if you don't have that, it will be created. So now that I've set up my cloud pages destination and my response capture, I'm actually going to collapse this section and we'll look at the next step. And so there's 2 additional sections here. One is visible fields and one is hidden fields. Pretty self-explanatory, especially if you've been if anyone's ever worked with a web form. Visible fields are those that you will allow the end user to see and interact with. So for example, we have a variety here that you can choose from. Text and select, radio checkboxes are all standard ones. Some that are a little bit different are the image and button choice. So we'll do a couple examples of those just so you can see what they are kind of look like. And then that last one down at the bottom is rating. And when you mouse over these, you get a great little GIF to show you what these can do. So that's visible fields. Hidden fields are fields that you will not display to the end user. So if you'd like to pass additional data, so if you're thinking about, potentially like a customer identifier, or in the case of like reviews, the product or the order that's associated with this interaction, you can add that hidden field and pass that data. It's included in the form, but it's not visible to the end user. So what we'll do is I'm going to start by adding a couple of these fields, and forgive me, I do have a little bit of this created. So what I'm going to do is I've added my label. So as we can see, that came up here. And then for a data attribute, this is the fields in your data extension. So I need to assign this. And this was an auto-created data extension. So one of the things we do is we give you an ID field. We're not going to use that here, but It's a primary key on this data extension. We can talk through kind of at the end what implications that has in terms of the data that you're collecting and how you can take advantage of this data extension having that primary key. So I'm going to create a new attribute, and then I'll give this the value of first name. So that's the name of the field in my data extension. So that's been added there. So that's perfect. And so then I'm going to add, again, some of this, helper text to this email. So I want them to understand that, they can really do this right within the inbox. This isn't a trick. And so that was looking pretty good. So I'm gonna run through these a little quickly in the interest of time. But what you'll see is the editing experience is very similar. I'm gonna create another new attribute. Obviously, this is exactly the same because it's a text input, which we've already done, but in the next two, we'll see some of the differences. Again, you have the option to make these required fields. You can set a max length on these, just so you can really, align the data that you were expecting to see with what is being provided. So let's do a button multiple choice. So this is where it gets a little more fun. So in this case, again, thinking about this financial services company, what are your financial goals? And then let's give them a description here. And in this case, the text inputs are one-to-one with a data extension field. And then in the multiple choice scenario, so a checkbox, a multiple button choice, or a multiple image choice, you're actually going to define a data attribute or the data extension field at the option level. And so this, if any of you ever use Smart Capture, this is going to differ a little bit from that experience. So within each of these options, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this one saving for, I'm going to give this a label, create another attribute for this. And so what happens in these scenarios is, I've got this field in the data attribute, so it's going to be saving for, and then the field value is what will be written to the data extension. The label is obviously what displays here. And so you could think of this, in this case, I've kind of doubled up on what I've included here, but you could also do something like a value of just Y in this field. So in this saving for field, if someone selects this option, a Y would be written as the value to the data extension. So I'll save that one. Let me grab this. I'm going to grab a few more of these. And then quickly create some of these. And again, each time I'm creating these, I'm adding a field to my data extension, which then I can later use for, additional personalization. Let's do one more. All right, so I'll save those. So this is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and add another input. Let's do an image multiple choice this time. And so this one's going to be a little bit different in that we're going to select images, hence the name. And what this allows us to do when you're adding options, again, the same field values and label, data extension names, but we now have the option to add our initial image. So in this case, I'm looking at banking. Let me find my banking image that I've created before that will always display. And then you have, a hover state. So in the case of a desktop or, some other alternative input device, if someone mouses over this, you can define an image that would display. And then there's a check state. I'm going to go ahead and select this. And for the banking check state, I've got this great check marks on this box. And so we'll see how that looks kind of at the end of this. And you don't need to define the hover or the selected state. Essentially, you can also style the border or some of the other colors around it to indicate when a selection has been made. I'll grab credit here, credit, check state, credit card selected, and I'll do one more here. I'll call this one. To click on my pasting. I'll call this one loans. I'll choose my loan image. Check state, loans. All right, so that one looks pretty good. So form's looking pretty good here. Actually, I missed my placeholder text on the last name, so let me go back and add that. To include that, great. Put it in the wrong spot. Cool. And then the last thing we want to talk about is the hidden fields. So I mentioned kind of, that these aren't displayed to the user, but this is where you can get, if you have those additional data attributes, you can pull in things, you can pull in values using personalization strings or AMP script. Any of the scripting kind of functions that you guys are used to using are available to use here, or, within the other parts of the form as well. But I really want to talk about is this ID field. And so the ID field that we include on auto-created DEs is a primary key field, as I mentioned. And so what that was allow us to do is, for instance, I can include a unique customer identifier here. And if I do that, every submission from this form, so I've set this up, I've sent it out, someone has this email in their inbox, when they click submit, it will be tied back to that primary key ID. So this is great in the scenario where maybe, you think people might come back to this, but you only want them to have one response within your data extension. So every time we receive that a submission from that primary key, that ID field, we're going to look up that row and update the data in that row. If that row doesn't exist yet, then we'll create that row and add it. One of the other things you could do is if you have a primary key field and you'd like to, get a unique row for each submission and not tie that back to a person or tie them back to a person in another way, you can leave the the primary key or the ID field in this case blank. And what will happen is when we receive those submissions with a empty primary key, we will generate a unique ID on the fly. And so then for each row in your data extension, you will have a uniquely generated ID field that you don't have to worry about. And then this gets really exciting when you go to situations where you have multiple primary keys. And so in this instance, you may have, customer identifier is one primary key field, and then a field that you want to generate that unique identifier for at submission time. And so another application of this is, you could think of writing like a timestamp that this email was sent or something else to kind of tie these back. But in the case of multiple primary keys, what we're doing is we're looking for the match on both rows. And if that's the case, we'll update that record. If we find one of the primary keys and not the other, we'll create a new row with those details. And so really this gives you a lot of flexibility to tie this back to a primary key. The other thing is you don't have to use a primary key field at all, not a requirement. You can just have a data extension and with no primary keys, in which case we will add a row for each submission. So in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and cancel that. I'm not gonna use the ID field here. And I'm gonna jump over to styling. So in the design tab, we've really surfaced a lot of different things. The first is the fallback. And we talked about this in the slides a little bit, but you've got the option to select none, in which case this collapses, or for us, we want to choose a block from content builder because we have an existing static scenario. And so we want to just drive people to that welcome fallback, to that same existing experience. And I can use this little eye icon to hover here. So if I look, that's what it'll look like for fallback recipients, primarily Outlook, for instance. This is what it's going to look like for everyone else. So now that we've got the fallback state defined, we can go through some of our other styling. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the description. You're going to see a lot of the same styling options through most of these accordions here. So I can change my alignment. I can bold. I can unbold. Looks like we're a little tight here, so I'm going to add some padding. Let's just add 8 pixels below, space that out a little bit. Again, you can style the submit button, required labels if you use that. I'm going to jump into the input style. So, this is styling for the actual text inputs. In this case, the button choice. Let's adjust this because I don't like the way that these are touching. So I'm going to go and I'm going to find the margin, and I'm just going to lock this, and I'm going to apply 5 all the way around, just so that there's enough tappable space there. I might actually adjust the image choice as well. Give those a little bit of space. I'll just use the space between setting and give that a 5. Those just kind of spread out a little bit. And so really, you should be able to style all of the elements to align with your brand. The great thing is if you don't set these, they're going to inherit from their containing element. So as you're building out the template, you can use that to your advantage to set some styles on that, either the entire email or specifically target the container for the form, and then those will cascade in if you do not override them by choosing styles here. So now that this is in pretty good shape, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click next. And then in the preview, once we get in here, we can interact with the form a little bit. You can see, okay, I can type, great. I can click on my buttons just to make sure, I didn't go through and set any of the hover styles or the selected states for the buttons. So this is the default setting for this one, but they work. I get my checkbox when I select this. These are great. I can unselect them. So that's looking good. So let's go ahead and send a test. Let's do this. I'll confirm send. And so we'll wait for a second and I can switch to the, switch my sharing here. Be this whole desktop. I'm going to switch to mail. Let's see if this works. All right. So let's wait for this email to come in.
So Matt, while we're waiting for the email, and I know that, as I indicated before, there will be plenty of opportunity for people to ask questions. And there are already some really great questions in the chat window, which we'll address after the presentation. In the meantime, I have 3 burning questions. So firstly, is this available on all Marketing Cloud editions?
That's a great question. So this is available on Pro and above editions that have, because you need to have access to Content Builder Cloud Pages. And also the last requirement is super messages. So there are some, some folks out there that may not have super messages, but that is a requirement.
And which is my second question. So with super messages, are we charged for a super message for every form we include in addition to the email send, or how does that work?
That's a great question, and I actually can't answer that yet because it's not generally available. But this will consume super messages at the send level. I can tell you that.
Right. Okay. And my last question before you go and continue your presentation is: so dynamic content. Let's say we want to go and change, and perhaps I've already answered this question myself, and we want to go and change the questions in our form based on some subscriber data, for example. Now, while it appears you can't go and build in to conditionally display form fields, I'm assuming that you could have different versions or permutations of a form and then save that block and then use it with dynamic content blocks to conditionally display the interactive form. Is that right? Or
there is a potential path forward there. So there's a couple of ways that you could actually tackle that. You could do different blocks with different questions. I think that's one definitely potential path. I think it probably depends on your end goal. Like, do you want these to live in different data extensions? Are you hoping for the same data extension? In which case, different data extensions clearly as the path would be different forms. And then how you would accomplish that, because this block is one that you have to use as the drag and drop, like into a template, you would need to basically include multiple blocks within the template, and then you could add conditional logic around them within the template, if that makes sense.
It does, thank you. And finally, I'm just thinking from a scenario, maybe this is for a product review based on a product I've purchased. So you indicated that, so you could have a static block saying, with an image of the and description of the product you purchased and then the form, and then I guess a hidden field that is either the product name or maybe SKU that you're using a personalization string, can't you, to pull that from the sendable data extension?
Yep, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Cool. So yeah, of course. And we're getting close to the end here anyway. So I just wanted to, open this up in my inbox. Great. It's looking good. It looks like it did when I built it. So, we can do a quick look here. I'll choose a couple of these options. Looks good. And then I'm going to go ahead and click submit. So this is going to take me back to this cloud page. Thank you. So this has been submitted. So now I'm just going to do a quick check of the data extension. So if I look in my data extensions, again, this will create an interactive content folder because I use the auto create method. And so when I go in here, if I find the one from today, oh, one record, that's promising. And I can see, you know, I left that ID field out. So here's an auto-generated primary key ID. I've got my last name, saving for. This was the value that I choose. Yes, I selected each of these. My name's in there. And so this all wrote to a data extension as I had anticipated. So that's great. So it looks like, you know, for my testing, my full end-to-end flow is working, and then I can roll this out to my subscribers from here. And so that's it. I've shown, you know, to build the form, the cloud page, and the data extension gets updated. So let's jump into questions, Elliot.
Great, thanks, Matt. Yeah, we've got many questions. So, so firstly, this first one, when will, and maybe this is kind of relevant, when will Marketing Cloud support AMP? That's the AMP for email.
Sure. That's a great question. We are actively investigating that. There are definitely lots of discussions and initial work happening. But luckily, this product, Interactive Email, does not require AMP. So this will work in Gmail without requiring AMP. So you get actually more support through this kind of form functionality by not using AMP in this case. And so we are looking into AMP, but for Interactive Email, this is straight HTML and CSS, so nothing to worry about there.
Great. Okay, thank you. And then I'll fold the other two questions into one. It's talking about, so I understand Rebel had, you know, a code version, but, you know, in interactive email, this is all done declaratively using content blocks in a template. So are there plans to offer this for developers that we can go and create our own forms programmatically using scripting languages in Marketing Cloud?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely something that we have you know, on our radar and are trying to kind of work through the implementation details of that. I can't guarantee that will materialize or when, but it's definitely something that, you know, we know that there's a lot of appetite for, and yeah, on our own team have a lot of appetite for, because that's, you know, part of our path as a standalone company. I think the benefit of using the block is really, well, you know, some people will see this as a lack of control. For us on the rendering side, which, you know, we don't want you guys to have to care about, you know, what HTML and CSS tricks we're pulling out of our bag to make sure that this works consistently across our supported email clients, and really allowing this to be used just in the block is how we can truly provide this at scale so that everyone can take advantage of it. When we get into the code view, it's just, there's a lot of opportunity to inadvertently kind of break both our interactivity and also your templates, and so that's why we've chosen to go this block route. But definitely, it's something that we're considering. We're trying to figure out, you know, how we could open this up to a code view as well.
Great. Okay. There's another question which maybe I could answer as well. It's, will this type of block be available in distributed marketing? So, I mean, I spent a lot of time distributed marketing over the past couple of months. So, I mean, I'm saying that. So you can include any content block that's available and add that to your email, and that will by virtue be available in distributed marketing. But you're not, I assume that at this stage, we're not providing the ability to go and create those forms from distributed marketing. That is, you're kind of confined to the image and the text, and the rich text blocks for distributed marketing.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, cool. So there's a question about email clients, but someone helpfully put a link to this well documented. There's a help article saying what are the supported clients. Another question about performance. Will it slow down sends if I'm sending this email to like 1 million subscribers?
No, this shouldn't. So obviously there's a big asterisk there, but it depends on, you know, what you're including in the form, but the form itself will not slow down performance. Good.
Okay. So other questions about customizing it with code, but we discussed that. At the moment, this is declaratively. And will the block work with Pine or Cerberus email templates? Not quite sure what. I'm not familiar with those either. No.
Yeah, if they're, I mean, templates that are essentially you're creating a content builder templates with slots, then you should be able to drag these in. There shouldn't be conflicts in terms of you know, CSS styling, for instance. That there shouldn't be anything there that would break it. So my initial reaction would be yes, but I'm not familiar with those.
Sure. So can we use something like content block by key for calling this content? I think the answer is yes. So you can go and save one of these forms as a block, and then you can interact with it just like you would any other block by using one of the content block AmpScript functions to go and conditionally display it on the page, for example.
Partially true.
Yeah.
You can save these as individual blocks, create these as individual blocks, but you will not be able to successfully call these in using content block by ID. So the reason for that is because we are making changes throughout the email. So in the head and footer, for example, that will not be accessible to the content by ID kind of call. You would get the chunk of the body content, but you wouldn't get the other updates that we're making to make sure that this functions correctly. So if you pull it in, you know, so how this works is if you use the little browser, these will be blocked. If you know the ID and you attempt to do it, you will have limited success getting the body content, but the full functionality will not be enabled.
Right, okay, thank you. There's a question here. Can we leverage Salesforce authorization form objects from within the email to automatically display correct consent collection notice? I'm not quite sure what this is referring to. Maybe it's.
I'm not sure I'm familiar with that either. Yeah, I think the questions around, you know, collecting consent on a form like this in the email are definitely interesting ones that we've discussed with both our customers as standalone company and our pilot customers. Really, you know, obviously this is kind of specific to, it sounds like, Salesforce implementation of potentially some other kind of technology, but just to comment on, you know, including something in an email where you can check a box and, you know, accept terms and conditions, or, you know, subscribe to additional marketing programs. Those are definitely possible, and those flows exist. It's usually a discussion, you know, with your legal team, so on what they're comfortable with in terms of, you know, what actually allows that. For us, you know, the inbox, you know, authenticated environment. So usually if someone's clicking a checkbox there, you can reasonably assume that they are who they say they are, but obviously, you know, each company is going to have different views on that.
Great, okay. There's another question about super message consumption, but that will be publicly announced. I mean, someone is assuming it ranges of several $100s based on a design. Again, it's not like a flat fee, is it? It's just based on would it be based on the amount of subscribers it's sent to, or would it be similar to?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not email.
It'll be based on sent.
Okay. So here's another question. Has there been any analysis done on what putting into a form does to deliverability? What a wonderful question. So
this is a great question.
Yeah. Does it affect email deliverability at all by including a form in the form elements?
So yeah, not that we've ever seen. So not the form itself. What we have seen is if you have a custom template that potentially has lived over the years and has a lot of different elements, or you have a very text-heavy, you know, content-centric email that you're sending out, one of the areas where you can get into kind of not even trouble, is just maybe potentially run into some issues, is the size, like the weight of the email. So, you know, Gmail has a limit at, you know, 102 kilobytes where it's going to clip off your content. Similarly, other email clients will look at, you know, something that has too much content in the actual sent email and kind of treat it a little bit differently. But from a, you know, in terms of, you know, are we going to get additional like spam filtering because we have a form? That's not something we've ever seen, and we have not encountered that.
Okay, good. Another great question is, where's form validation done? That is, if we're posting to a landing page for processing, what does that look like when there can be an issue with form input? Maybe a form field is invalid. Where's that validation done?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the validation will be done on the cloud page using HTML5 validation. So the main things that we support at this moment are the required fields and then the max character counts. And so really what that's going to allow you to do is, if I check, for instance, in this form we're looking at on the screen, if I check my first name field is required and someone clicks submit from their email without entering that, we're going to present this exact same form on that cloud page. And we're going to call out, this field is required, and they'll have the opportunity then to fill it in and click submit.
Okay, and will it be pre-filled with what they already completed, or will they have to start over?
Yep, it'll be pre-filled with what they've already completed.
Fantastic. Okay.
So in the case of a required field, that one necessarily wouldn't, you wouldn't have it pre-filled, but in the case of, a max character count kind of limitation, then it would be pre-filled. And the other form fields would obviously, so in this case, if I left last name blank, I've already clicked in a couple places on these other ones, everything would be carried through that I had already selected.
Okay, and just another question, that can you pre-fill form values using AMP script variables? You talked about hidden fields, so can you do the same for, to pre-fill the first name, for example, pull that from from a sendable data extension?
This is a great question. So at GA, this will not be available, but this is definitely something on our roadmap that we are looking to incorporate into the product so that you can pre-populate, especially, if you're thinking about this in terms of, preference centers or profiles where you may want to reconfirm information over time. You would send that out and say, hey, here's what we've got. Is this correct? Make any changes that you'd like and click submit. We're definitely looking to be able to pre-fill those values.
Great, okay. And how about, this is a question about, are there any plans to expose the new Cloud Page REST APIs to the public? So is there an API around that specific new page type in Cloud Pages, and will we be able to interact with it?
That's actually a great question that I've not come up against. So in terms of what we're doing on the Cloud Pages, we're just leveraging kind of existing functionality that you can do today. I don't actually know the details around that, if there would be any changes or, interacting with this page type specifically, if it would be different or if it's available.
Right, okay. And how about sending data to Sales Cloud? So we're storing that data in a data extension, but is there an option to go and create a new record in Sales Cloud, or at the moment it's just...
And so one of the way that we've thought about this, so far is around Journey Builder. And so once that's in a data extension, you can use Journey Builder to kick off a journey to then update objects within Salesforce or create objects within Salesforce, depending on your use case. And so that's really the path that we've envisioned. But there's also other ways that you could, potentially think about, getting this data out of the data extension and, using it within Sales Cloud. And so I think those may depend on your implementation and what you're looking to accomplish.
Great. Okay, there's a question about availability. So I think it's going to change. I mean, Salesforce now has adopted Canary deployments so that that it's deployed on different stacks on different dates. But we'll start seeing this new functionality available from next month.
Yes. So actually, for this first one, this will be provisioned by April 10th. So you will see it in your account by April 10th.
Okay. And how about like validation types? Do you have like to check the email address is in the correct format, or it's a kind of date time? Can you have date time pickers?
We don't have date time pickers yet. So that's the one that it's a little trickier, based on a variety of factors, but we are actively looking at that. In our text inputs, I'm going to click into it here so we can see we have a few data types that we can validate against. So you can do text, email, number, telephone, and URL. And those align with HTML5 validation types. So these are the ones you can specify today. These are not necessarily related to your data extension field. So for instance, you could have a text field in your data extension and then put a number validation on the form up front and collect that number in the field, which if you have a number field in your data extension, then you should be using number validation here. So there's a few nuances there, but these are the types that we support currently.
Okay, another question is input masking available or possible? That is, like when you type a password, it appears as masked. I'm not can't think of
Yeah,
a
that's
use
a great
case for
question.
that.
So, yeah, that's an interesting one. I actually haven't heard that request before. So in the email clients themselves, that definitely is not possible. One of the things that may be possible is on the form, but you're only going to see the form when on the cloud page if there's a validation error, and so the actual opportunity to use an input mask in that kind of scenario would not be possible.
Right, okay. I just want to also confirm whether this is a use case, and I don't believe that it is. Could you use this for like an abandoned cart, and you go and complete the purchase from your email by, but again, you're just capturing this data in a data extension, so probably not, right? It would.
So there may be some ways that you could creatively do this, but it will depend on your e-commerce solution. So if you think about it, what, how you could potentially explore that would be passing through your product information, some kind of unique identifier for your customer. And then likely you would need to use the redirect option on the cloud page instead of the success content builder message. And you would pass that to a page on your site that would then, parse that data and handle it from the URL.
Right, okay. I've also one burning question, more of a feature request, because I'm anticipating it's not available yet. So specifically for the developers out there, we've recently seen enhancement to ENS, which is the event notification service. That is when an email is opened or clicked, or for transactional messages, obviously when it's sent, we can subscribe to a webhook, so make a callback. Would it be possible to have ENS support for form submission, so that when in addition to serializing that data into a data extension, it can go and make a webhook to an external system that we can do something with that data?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a wonderful feature request. It's definitely something that we are exploring with the relevant teams on how we can enable that kind of functionality.
Awesome. Okay, and so one last question here. I'm not quite sure, but you have a stab at answering it. Does help content outline what's possible with progressive profiling? Not quite sure what's meant by that.
So the help content is going to walk through how to set up a form. I think in terms of what's possible with progressive profiling, I'm going to just guess based on the question itself here, but I think that what you'll find in help is just an overview of how to use the product. So the kind of how you can configure the questions, how you can configure your data extension, and then from there it's really going to be up to you to define your questions, define the data that you want to collect, and then understand where to best put that as after it's been collected and how to action upon it.
Sure, but can you just scroll down in the right-hand pane of your email just so we can see the bottom there? So there is a submit button. So if I abandon this form, if I only complete the first 3 fields, it wouldn't be submitted, would it?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Great.
So you have to, the subscriber has to take that final action to click submit in order for us to capture the data. And that's why, again, the importance of making sure that the subscriber understands that is, especially as you initially start sending these, to call out, hey, please fill in the forms right in this email and don't forget to click submit. Helper text like that is very valuable, and testing the best combinations of that can really improve your interaction and your submission rates pretty greatly across these kinds of campaigns.
Because ultimately it has to take them somewhere. You can't make AJAX calls behind the scenes from an email, can you? That when someone
not exactly. There are some exciting things that hopefully down the road we'll be able to integrate into this, where you can understand where they've interacted. But it's not necessarily like you said, an AJAX call behind the scenes. There's a little more nuanced approaches via CSS that can inform what they've done. But passing the actual data requires a submit in a case like this.
Okay, so there's another question here. So are cloud pages secure since we're passing private information? I mean, one of your cloud pages wasn't HTTPS, but yes, you can and should get an SSL certificate for your cloud pages. This isn't enabled by default. You have to purchase that separately. I'd say any form that you have on a cloud page, you should definitely ensure that you purchase an SSL certificate for it. So you need to contact your Marketing Cloud account representative. There is GDPR here. I have just one small question. So there's this do not track profile attribute that's available, and as its name implies, it won't track opens or clicks. I guess this really doesn't apply though for interactive email. If someone actually goes and submits a form, then whether
they're making an active choice to share that data.
Yeah.
Yeah,
great.
so I think in those kind of situations, depending on what you're collecting, again, consult with your legal team, but understanding what you'd want to include with those submissions, and in the case of something, potentially that would fall in the realm of GDPR, in terms of, the date that is captured, when, why, just so that you can back up this data with the reasoning behind it in case there's a question in the future.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Matt. And we've managed to get through all the questions, which is awesome. Thanks for everyone who's attending. And I'll be sharing a recording of this presentation in the next 24 hours. So thanks, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening, wherever you are.
Thank you so much, Elliot.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye.